So today we're taking a look at chapter 9 from our book. And I'm going to try to move through it quicker than I have the last couple of times. I know I say that every time, but there's just so much interesting information to learn about in each one of these different chapters. And so it kind of makes it hard to move through it quickly. So adolescence is a time of tremendous amount of development. And during this time, peers become more important than families, or at least more important than they've been in the past stages. And the caregivers become less important than they've been in the past stages. But that's a topic for chapter 10. And so I'm going to try not to belabor that too much as we move through chapter 9. Right now, I really want to talk about physical development, particularly puberty. And strictly speaking, puberty is a process of sexual maturation. And so I want you to remember that. Puberty is a process of sexual maturation. And sometimes when we talk about puberty, we use it as kind of an all-encompassing term to talk about a lot of different things, but it really is about sexual maturing sexually. So at the end of the process, boys and girls are fertile, males can impregnate, and females can get pregnant. And it starts with the release, as your slide says, of kisspeptin, which is a chemical that's produced in the brain. And then the other hormones above come in after the kisspeptin starts it. And I don't expect you to remember what hormone is, all the hormones that are released. But what I do want you to remember is that the process of puberty starts with the release of a brain chemical and then with the hormones, okay? It's said by some people that puberty starts with a kiss, and by that they're talking about this kisspeptin chemical that signals the beginning of puberty. And the reason why it's called kisspeptin is because the researchers discovered it when they were working in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And so it's not a physical kiss, it's actually named after the Hershey's Kisses. So you guys do know that Hershey, Pennsylvania is where they produce Hershey's Kisses, right? So some of the hormones that's produced come from the testes in the males and from the ovaries in the females. So we hear a lot about androgen hormones like testosterone in males and estrogen in females. But the truth is that all adolescents produce androgen hormones, testosterone. Females have testosterone as well as males. And testosterone is the most discussed of those androgen hormones. And they also all produce estrogen and progesterone. And progesterone is important in reproduction for females. The difference is that androgen production is much higher in males, and estrogen production increases during this puberty process much more in females. So these hormones, combined with other hormones circulating in the blood, cause a series of changes to children's bodies that promote that maturing of both the primary and the secondary sexual characteristics. And the secondary sexual characteristics, like enlarged breast in females and deeper voices in males, these early outward signs of the beginning of puberty in both sexes is going to be the growth of pubic hair and the growth of scrotum and testes in boys and the beginning buds of breast in girls. So first menstruation in females and first ejaculation in males are considered the beginning of sexual maturation, but they're also at the end of puberty. So at what age do these things happen? Well, That's based on several factors. We know that in part it's influenced by genetics. And we know that because when they've done twin studies, they always, the twins, identical twin studies, I guess I should be more specific there. The twins usually begin and end the process within a couple of months of each other. And also mothers and daughters tend to start at about the same age, start this process of puberty. But we are seeing some serious trends towards earlier ages of starting puberty. And these seem to be a combination of factors. So besides genetics, there seems to be some environmental factors like it discusses here. Less exercise, higher calorie food intake, how much body fat they have, and then some things that are rather odd sounding, but research has proven that they play a part in the beginning of puberty, which is conflict in the family or some other kind of stressor like living in crowded conditions, being around certain chemicals. And these are chemicals that are called EDCs, and they include things like flame retardants, pesticides, some pharmaceutical agents, lead, mercury, some things found in plastic, and there's more, but that gives you an idea. So some other things that are environmental in nature is that may cause early puberty is families without a father parent present. And in some research, they found that just divorce itself causes early puberty. Early childhood abuse and even low socioeconomic status can also contribute to early puberty. Now, do we know how they contribute to our early puberty? No. We just know that people who have these characteristics in common tend to go through puberty earlier. And there also seems to be a, I guess we would call it a racial component with when puberty starts. Your book says that a study done in some major U.S. cities, San Francisco, New York City, and I'm sure there was some others, I don't remember, that had a population sample of 1,200 females showed that pubic hair and breast development in girls started as young as 6 or 7. That's awfully young. At age 7, early breast development was found for 23% of African American girls in the study, 15% of the Hispanic girls, and 10% of Caucasian girls. And then at age 8, those percentages really jumped up in that study. And for African American, it was 42.9, 30.9 for Hispanic, and 18.3 for Caucasian. Now, I don't expect you to remember those percentages, but I do need you to remember that we're seeing puberty begin about 6 months to 2 years earlier than the data was from like 20 years ago indicated. And the factors that we believe are contributing to it is another thing that I'd like for you guys to remember. So these are some of the things that are causing it, as well as genetic factors. Does that make sense? Okay, so so we have adolescents that are dealing with puberty. And if that wasn't hard enough, along with puberty, we see a rapid increase in size, a growth spurt, to go along with the changes in shape and the proportion of the body. And over about a 4-year span, the average increase in height for boys and girls is about 10 inches. And boys gain about 42 pounds during that same 4-year span, and girls gain about 38. So different parts of the body is also growing at different times. And so along with the growth spurt, along with the puberty, along with everything that these guys have going on, some of the facial features like their nose or their ears will grow much faster than the skull. And so they'll go through a period of time where their nose may look abnormally large for their face, or their ears. And these things are things that you will see as a helping professional. You will have adolescents who are very traumatized by the change in their appearance, not just height and weight, but also these odd growth things. And not only that, their hands and their feet and their arms and their legs grow before the torso. So that may leave them looking like they have abnormally long arms and legs and a teeny tiny torso. And all of these things can leave these teens or these children feeling very unattractive. So for girls, the growth spurt begins and ends about 2 years earlier than it does for boys. Boys will have broader shoulders, girls will have broader pelvic area and larger breast. And those are things that are visible from the outside. But on the inside, there's also some differences between the sexes. The size of the heart and lungs increases more in boys. And boys also develop more muscle and thicker bones than the girls do. And these things contribute to the fact that males are just flat stronger than females. On average, females of the same size, both at adolescence and in adulthood. There's always going to be an exception to that, but generally, they are stronger than females of the same general size. So we know we have hormones now, we have changing bodies, we have growth spurts. So let's add just a little bit more excitement at this age. The adolescent brain sees more change and development during adolescence than at any other stage except for infancy. So let's talk about those changes, and some of them are listed there on your slide. Gray matter peaks during middle childhood and begins to decrease in puberty due to pruning. And if you guys don't remember what that pruning was, it's the brain's way of getting rid of things that is unused or dysfunctional. So if they have synapses that are not being used, then the brain will prune those and get rid of them, those neural pathways. And in adolescence, pruning occurs primarily in the areas of the brain that have to do with higher order functions, especially in the prefrontal cortex. And as gray matter volume decreases, white matter increases because of that continuing axon myelination. Remember, we talked about, I think it was last week, that the axon myelination is the white insulation around those axons. And so it literally is white when they talk about white matter. And myelination allows for faster information processing. Axons can transmit impulses up to 100 times faster after myelination than they can before. And the neurons with myelinated axons can fire up to 30 times more frequently. So that's a significant increase in the ability to process information. So in adolescence, we see more efficient information processing due to these brain changes, and that's important. You'll want to remember that. At puberty, there's also large shifts in the production of neurotransmitters and the enzymes that metabolize them. And of particular importance is the decline in the serotonin levels and the rise of dopamine levels that we see in adolescence. So what does that really mean? Well, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's important in many brain areas, actually. But some of the things that it's critical for is learning, processing emotions, and in anticipating and experience rewards. So good things that make us happy. So increased dopamine is a good thing, but at the same time, serotonin is decreasing. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's important in modulating mood cognition, reward, learning, memory, and some other physiological processes like vomiting. So you are seeing those dopamine increases, but you're also seeing the serotonin decreases. So before we start talking about the different regions, well, let me just go ahead and talk about it. While the brain is developing a lot during adolescence, a lot, remember, more than any other stage other than infancy, the different parts of the brain develop at different rates. And the prefrontal cortex, which is really important for rational decision making, it's important for planning, and most important, it's important for the evaluation of risk. So risky behaviors. It's what says, oh, this is a good idea, or gee, maybe you might not really want to jump that motorcycle over 4 cars. But this part of the brain, this prefrontal cortex, will not fully develop until sometime probably in the mid-20s, early to mid-20s. And the subcortical areas of the brain, they mature much faster. And this is a problem. And it's a problem because it's believed that this imbalance in the brain development is why that adolescents score higher. I know this is not going to shock those of you who are teachers for sure, but adolescents score higher than any other group on sensation seeking. You want to remember this if you didn't already know it, and I'm sure most of you did. Adolescents score higher than any other group on sensation seeking. And if you don't know what sensation seeking is, it's defined as the need for varied, novel, and complex sensation and experiences, and the willingness to take on physical and social risk for the sake of those experiences. So according to Casey's research, and she, I'm not sure which, has done quite a bit of research in this particular area. If sensation seeking is rewarding and the emotional brain, especially the subcortical approach system, is maturing more rapidly than that more rational prefrontal cortex, that regulatory circuitry, then teens might literally anticipate and experience more pleasure from risky behavior than any other group. So not only do they not have the part of the brain developed to tell them, that's not a good idea, but their actual pleasure sensations may be stronger than at any other age. So they may also be less able to regulate their behavior in potentially rewarding situations, whether they really are or not, if they think that they may be a rewarding situation. And chapter 10 is going to talk more about that topic, so I'm not going to go further with it today, but it is just fascinating. And before we leave the slide, I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't talk about that during this time, the stress system becomes more responsive and remains more responsive through young adulthood. So it's more likely to ready itself for the fight or flight that I know you guys have all heard about at this point in a person's life than at any point prior to this time. And in the last paragraph on page 347 and then the top of 348, your book gives an excellent example of research over this phenomena. And part of that research is the fact that chronic or severe or unpredictable stress can have especially negative effects for this age group. So it's really worth opening your book and reading that little bit. I thought I would explain it all, but I'm afraid that it would lose something in the translation. So before we start talking about behavioral and emotional changes, I'm going to stop this section and we'll come back and talk about those in the next section.